Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired. Sup, Holmes?
Beware, your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Scratchy old abrasive face. Sinistar, thank you for starting off the show as you always do. You are my best friend and my favorite person. And Jeff Luke, you are my second favorite person.
Yeah.
You're a guy. You're on the show. You're kicking off. Yeah, what's going on behind you? There's stuff on a TV.
Oh, we're just playing some video games back there. Adventures of Lolo. One of my favorites.
Oh, that's what that is. Yeah, it is Wayforward, Gust, and you are kicking it off, and it wouldn't be a Wayforward interview if it weren't for the fact that Adventures of Lolo was brought up, at least at some point. You're the fastest one to bring it up, though.
Well, it's just one of my favorite games. It's all of ours. It's weird, right? Yeah. Well, I figured that's why I work at Wayforward, because we all have this bond. That's the only thing that brings us together.
Adam Tierney, Austin Evansmith, all people we've talked to about that game before. What is it that you love about Adventures of Lolo? What's your take?
Okay, so I grew up. How about that? No, I grew up playing that game like so much. Like I don't know, a relative got it for me, and I was like, "This is like one of the craziest games." It's simple, but there's so much to it. I have to freaking shoot people. I gotta move crap. I got this guy who's just gonna kill me instantly. What? And it gets so hard after a while, and I was like, "Man!" But I'm determined to beat this game. And ever since then, it's just like pure nostalgia. I'm like, "Yes, it's Lolo." Hello,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Lolo and Lala were later absorbed by Nintendo.
Yeah.
And became Kirby bosses.
How about that? I always felt bad beating him up, but at the same time, I was like, well, you clearly did something bad. Kirby is way cuter than you guys, kinda. So.
I always thought Kirby and all of the ball-shaped characters from Nintendo, I just felt like they were borrowing from Lolo a little bit after that. Jigglypuff as well.
Well, here's the connection, right? Is Hal.
I thought you were starting a sentence, but you're right, Hal. Hal made Adventures of Lolo, and then they ate Hal.
Yeah.
And then did Hal work on Pokemon? I can't remember. I don't think so.
I don't think so. But
it's
all still Nintendo at that point, so whatever.
Absolutely. So, Jeff Luke, you are a man.
I am a man.
You started playing video games when you were how old?
2?
Really?
Yeah. I can't say I ever beat a game when I was 2, because that would be a straight up lie. But I did beat a game when I was 4, and that was Mega Man 2. So how about that? Mega Man 2.
That game is so hard. You were 4 years old?
My brother taught me. He was like, here, you're going to do this thing. What's this? And you're going to use these special weapons. And I was like, oh, I get it. Of course, weaknesses. Who doesn't have that?
At 4, I'm trying to imagine. For me, it's different. And I talk about that on almost every episode. How I have a generation gap between myself and a lot of the guests. For me, 4 was like Pac-Man at best, which was a very simple, wonderful game.
Yes.
Design basics really mastered in terms of taking a little and doing a lot with it, as with Lolo as well. But I can't even picture being 4 and playing Mega Man. Did that spark something in you to want to make video games after that? Do you think that's when you started to get the idea?
Well, yeah, I'd say. I mean, the game that really pushed me into the realm of, like, I'm going to make something like this was Blaster Master. That game just blew my mind. I was like, what? I'm a tank, I can jump out, and I'm, like, super vulnerable, but I'm super cute, and there's top-down stuff. What? And that pretty much created, that was a spark.
Huh.
And then it was like Mission Impossible at the end there.
I do know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Blaster Master was an eye-opening game, to say the least. That was a time when no one knew exactly what was possible with video games, and certainly people who were playing them we didn't know what was going to happen next at any time, and that was totally eye-opening to actually have a field where you are just controlling the guy top-down, but then also being able to be both the car, a dude.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of pre-GTA in that way. When I first played GTA, I was like, "This is Blaster Master, but worse, much worse."
This is Blaster Master with cop shooting. Yes.
So you were still young when Blaster Master came out. I think that was around the time of Mega Man 2, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty similar time, yeah. So maybe those two combined, honestly. Like, there's that whole period of time, there's so many good games that came out, you know. You've got Blaster Master, you got Mega Mans, you got the Akari Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Akari Warriors was interesting because it showed me that video games were aware that movies existed, that movies were bigger than them. So they were going to try to just steal from them, just make Rambo and the other Rambo with a slightly different colored headband, and they just killed jungle guys. Yeah. And but still, it was pretty innovative in terms of the aiming. Even back then, just aiming in different directions was like a revelation.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And now, yeah?
Oh, no, go ahead. You start.
I was going to say that you're taking all of these things and working on the regular show. Mordecai and Rigby in 8-Bit Land.
That's the one.
We'll be having fun talking about that later. But in the meantime, people should know how you got to where you are now. You've been working in the video game industry for quite some time now, is that right?
Yeah, let's see. Like almost 8 years now.
Wow. That's a pretty long time. A third of your adult life, roughly? Maybe a little bit less?
Yeah, just about a third. I'm turning 29 tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday. That's great. Ah! What can I get you? I've got a... I will mail you something. Do you want this? Bizarro Comics?
Sure.
Ruining my dog chewed this part of it.
That's even
still
better.
You can read it. Good. This is Dave Cooper.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Cooper. He drew a Wonder Woman story in here.
Nice.
It's really good. With the most faces.
That's really good. I like that, yeah.
I'm mailing it to you, Jeff Luke. Done.
All right.
So you're turning 29.
Yeah.
When did you get started in the game industry?
Let's see. I guess 21. How about that? 2006. So okay. Well, I guess 2006. So 7 years actually.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
21. That is awfully young.
I'm bad at the math. Yeah, it was cool. I was doing construction before that, and also working as a chef, because I went to school to be a chef, but then my school had some crazy problems, and all the teachers got fired because of drugs. Plain and simple. I'll throw it out there. I'm not going to tell you what school, just for their reputation, because it wasn't their fault, you know, sort of. And
wow. So but that was no fault of yours. You were just a good student learning how to be a chef, and you had to stop going to school because drugs in the school, and that led to you doing construction. I imagine.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm like, what kind of world is this?
Yeah, no kidding.
No, I got to switch all my my credit. Well, I got basically a free semester of school because of it, and so I switched over to game design. So I was like, oh, well, maybe this is the right route to do it. So I had a teacher. He worked at Monolith, like old Monolith on Blood and stuff like that, which was really cool. And but he was just teaching us how to 3D model. Here are some generic basics of level design. And that was the whole curriculum. And I was like, well, I think I've played enough games, and I might kind of get the idea of, you know, standard practices. And 3D modeling, I guess I can learn this. So I started doing it, and I got just burnt out. I was like, I feel like I'm not learning anything. I feel like some jerk because I'm like, well, I'm better than that. But
well, you're not alone. You're the third guest in a row who's Last week we had Cassie Chu on the show. She did level design on Electronic Superjoy. Week before that we had Paul Veer, who does graphics for Vlambeer and a bunch of other people. They all went to school for game design. They all were just taught 3D modeling, and they all were sad. I get this feeling that the teachers didn't realize that the generation of students they were having were brought up on a different kind of game, and that there was an audience for a different kind of game at that point. Was that the feeling that you had working with your teachers at that point?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is they all knew the industry, but I think they had an idea. They're like, well, I'm going to jump into teaching because the game industry is probably about to really explode here soon. Which, it has, I would say, but there's a lot of changes happening. I think people are realizing that Call of Duty is not the only thing out there. Big blockbuster games aren't the only thing. The indie scene is exploding, People are able to self-publish because of Kickstarter and all this great stuff, and, you got Steam, Greenlight, and all this. It's great. It gives the indie dev so much opportunity to make, their dream game. Like, I could go out and make a new Blaster Master that's not called Blaster Master. And maybe there's an opportunity for that, Maybe somebody's going to be like, thank God someone finally did this. I'm like, yes, that's what I've been saying.
It's funny. There is not enough games like Blaster Master, in my opinion. Metal Warriors, Konami game on the Super Nintendo, gave me a little bit of that feeling. You like that game too?
Oh, yeah. I love that game.
Very few. I know Luke Bernard was working on a really cool game. I don't know if you know Luke Bernard. He worked on Eternity's Child and Mecha Wars series of games. He was getting really excited about something, but there's not enough of that.
Yeah.
Maybe now that you're at Wayforward, well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. We'll
Something
see.
might happen.
Maybe it could.
Mordecai and Rigby.
Yeah.
Nate Ditland. There might even be a Blaster Master type level on there.
Well,
maybe.
We'll talk about that.
I doubt you'll be able to reveal anything, but it's exciting to pretend and imagine.
Yes.
So, you're in college. You're learning things that aren't that applicable to you, but you've already learned a lot and thought a lot about game design on your own, it sounds like. You get out of college.
So naturally, I do what every good college student does, and it goes, I want to make some money right now. Let's get into construction. So I do that for a while, and I'm fabricating rebar and all this stuff to like specifications so people can build bridges and crap like that. So I'm the guy who's bending this stuff with machines and stuff, that cool stuff that doesn't ever stuff.
That sounds like pretty awesome stuff. I want to bend a bar.
Right?
How did you get a job bending bars? You can just get one right out
I
of
walked
college?
in, I said, hey, I see you got some bars there. You want some bent? And it just went, whoo. No, that didn't happen. I had a friend who worked at a company that did it, and he was like, hey, we're hiring. You want a job? I was like, how much? He's like, some monies. And I was like, all right, that's better than what I have right now. Great. And I will say this about construction. You get fit real fast.
Absolutely. I did landscaping a little bit.
Yeah.
And the amount of calories you burn and the amount your muscles get worked.
Yeah. I was like, I'm just eating like 2 chickens for breakfast, like 14 eggs for breakfast number 2. Yeah. It was crazy. But
it's hard work though, painful work.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it teaches you discipline, which is a big part of game design, I think. Being in pain and having to push through it. So how did you jump from construction to game design after that?
Pure luck. I got really injured on the job, and my arm. So we had this like giant hydraulic cutter machine, and it had a piece of one of the rebar pieces had got lodged in the machine. And at that point, it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. So I'm trying to hang on to it so this thing doesn't just fly out the building and kill someone. And I'm like, okay, here we go. We unplug the machine, plug it back in, and it springs back up, and it's fine. We're like, oh, good. And then all of a sudden, all the pressure releases, and this rebar just shoots out, pulls my arm with it, and just like tugs a ton of muscle. Ripped up a bunch of muscle in my arm, and I couldn't grip or anything for like a month. It was horrible.
Oh
Yeah.
no, you got attacked by a robot, basically.
Yeah, robots, yeah, and that's when I was like, well, I know what our future looks like, and it is grim.
So, injured, ripped
Hmm.
up arm,
Yeah.
game development?
Yeah, so then I was super crazy on pain meds and doctor's appointments for about a month straight, and I was like, well, and I'm all like, bro, I'm gonna look for a new job. I'm too young for this. I don't want to die now. So I go on Craigslist of all things, Craigslist. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just see if there's video game stuff out there. And fancy that, there's a level design position at a place called Fifth Cell. I'm like, what is this? So I look it up, and it's like this game, Drawn to Life. I was like, oh, I saw stuff about this over online for indie dev stuff. Oh, interesting. Oh, so I call them out, or I shoot them an email. They get back to me within minutes. They're like, oh, are you interested? I'm like, yes. And they're like, can you send some examples? So I'm like, I don't have examples. What? Who has examples? Who's never been in the game industry? I'm like, okay. So I start stealing tile sets from online from different games and just building levels. I do like a couple side-scrolling levels and a top-down type of environment, and I send it to them. They're like, "Hey, you want to come in for an interview?" I was like, "Yep." And a week later, I was working there and starting to make levels on Drawn to Life, and the rest is history.
That is amazing. That no one knew, at least I didn't know at that point in my life, that was humanly possible.
Right?
I wanted to work in the game industry when I was in my early 20s. I think, most people did, that I knew anyway. But the point of entry seemed impossible. But by just throwing it out there, actually looking, and then being overconfident in how you present yourself and just seeing if they pick you, seems to have worked for you. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I learned a valuable lesson from. This was so weird. So I'm a huge fan of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie. And in the making of, the guy who's like the cartographer slash the map maker slash French speaking liaison guy, he apparently walked in for an audition, and they asked him if he speaks French, and he hadn't spoken French since like high school, and it was like very little. It was like introductory French. And he says, well, I don't speak very good French, but I can learn. And he said that all in French. And they're like, great, you're hired. Because they didn't know what he was saying. So I like to think that, in a way, I probably lied a little bit and just overextended what I really could do just to get the job.
But you didn't extend what you would do. You would design levels for those people, for sure. I assume foiled at it, but how much you'd done prior to that, well, maybe there was an exaggeration, but it worked out. I can't remember how long Fifth Cell was at that point. This was before Locke's Quest. This was before Scribblenauts. Was Drawn to Life one of their first games?
Drawn to Life, well, so they started in the mobile world. They were making a bunch of little mobile games, like licensed games, like Lemony Snicket or something, and some other games like that. And but they're all really good games. I mean, it was the old like T9 style games. Press 6 to walk right.
Sure.
Yeah. And but they did it really well compared to like almost everybody else out there. They were like, oh, these guys know what they're actually doing. Like they get it. So they they bought backup carts for the Nintendo DS. And we're developing just like on their own with like the free libraries for Nintendo DS that people had made. So they were making a homebrew version of Drawn to Life to fish around out there and like show different publishers, and then hopefully get approval from Nintendo to actually be developers. And it worked out for them, which was really cool because now Drawn to Life happened, which is, while the game has its flaws, I think it was a very, very innovative game for its time, especially.
Absolutely. It was years ago now, long before it was a movement, really, to try to make games more accessible, but at the same time maintain a lot of depth for them. At that point, we were still in geez, like Grand Theft Auto was on one end, Call of Duty was on the other, and then Mario was pretty much strictly a polygon-based series that played in a 3D environment. So going back to that was kind of going back to kind of the design basics. Almost, I don't know if it's fair to call it retro anymore, but at the time, I remember Drawn to Life felt very like a return to the kind of games I grew up with, and I appreciated it just for that, as I did with Lock's Quest. Your own Jim Sterling, he still talks about Lock's Quest.
Lock's Quest is one of my favorites. Late at night?
Me too. Yeah, he calls me up and was like, remember Lock's Quest? Oh, God.
Oh, it's so good. I've been playing it forever. Yeah. Yeah, you know.
What was your role on Lock's Quest?
Lock's Quest, I was a scenario designer, so I helped create some of the little, the levels and the little story parts that played out, like run Lock around and set bombs on the bad guy bases and all that stuff. And help design a lot of the little mini-game things that you had to do while you're playing. You're like, oh, I'm going to repair faster, and you had the little ratchet thing down on the bottom screen to play around with. On top of that, I did a buttload of art for it, and helped design some of the, just wrote out some of the GDD stuff, like some of the higher-end concept stuff. So GDD, that was kind of...
For people who don't know, what is GDD?
That is the game design doc. That is the guidelines like that you could send to somebody and they go, I get this game because I have this 200-page document that tells me exactly what it is.
Those are hard to write. That's a whole technique and science and just in that. Yeah, and being able to communicate things that are really more tactile. I mean, if you read about football on paper, you're like, what? Why is he kicking the ball? I thought he threw it. It doesn't add up. But if you can communicate that, you can get your game made and also get people to make a better game around the design doc. It's not easy. Huh. Interesting.
Not at all. No. Yeah, I mean, that was my first real... on Drawn to Life, I did a little bit of that stuff. I would write out like scenario, like quests and stuff like that in the GDD. But I never really got a chance to just like sit there and really take in the whole GDD as a whole. But Lock's Quest was definitely my opportunity to do that because there was a lot of stuff I was writing in that thing. And I was like, oh, I get it. We got to start from the basics, kind of explain a little bit, and then break those out into subcategories. And, that thing is chock full of pictures. That was our best way of telling people how to do stuff. It was like, here's step 1, person walks this way. Step 2, they get hit, show effect, all the stuff. And it was detailed, really detailed.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would have to be. Lock's Quest, for people that don't know, really critically acclaimed. I don't know how the sales were back, I think it was before DS piracy got really bad, and a lot of the more, the less mainstream-friendly games, they did take a hit from piracy, from what I'm told by a lot of people. But it was before that, really nice art style to it. I think Paul Robertson might have done some of the animations on that, I remember.
Yeah, he did for that and Drawn to Life, actually.
Oh, yeah?
And strangely enough, Adam Tierney did a little hidden Raposa animation that's in the game.
Adam Tierney of Wayforward.
Yes.
At that point, he was at Fifth Cell then, or was
he was doing freelance art occasionally here and there. So.
Oh, interesting. I know he was at IGN at one point too. I think it was around then, IGN Pocket. So for people that don't know, explain what Lock's Quest is a little bit.
Lock's Quest is it's a unique spin on a tower defense game. I mean, tower defense was kind of peaking then. It was getting big. It was like, oh yes, this idea of towers and building them and putting weapons on them. This sounds neat. Well, we decided, hey, how about we add a cool function where you get to run around as your little guy. You get to beat up bad guys as they're coming, so you can help actually defend your base as well as these turrets you're putting up. And in real time, run up to these turrets, repair them, and we'll all do that all around little fun mini games that will help you boost up your powers and stuff like that in real time. And it was a fun little story, pretty art style.
Yeah. What aspects of the art did you do?
I did a lot of I did some effects and making sure there was a lot of like production stuff. Like, oh, okay, I need to make sure that this art's going to be like cut up correctly, so that way it actually masks correctly. So I had to actually go in and like manually edit a bunch of art because it just wasn't going to work. And this was like the art that we got from our outsourced people, and then I had to add extra crap to it so it would actually mask correctly and stuff like that. So when you ran behind it, your character would like show as a like a shadow version of your character. So you're like, oh, I'm behind this thing, because that's terrible, running behind something and not knowing where you are. You're like, oh, where am I? Who am I?
It is an existential crisis moment when that happens. It sounds like there's so much. Something that's always interesting to me to find out how much goes on behind the scenes with the development of a game like that. It wasn't just as simple as making the assets, making the programming, having the concept, and putting it together. How many people worked on that game, if you had to guess?
Oh, let's see. 10 to 12, mostly programmers.
Really?
Me, and one other guy were the only like designers on it. Besides Jeremiah, who's the creative director at Fistcell.
Gotcha.
He writes a lot of the stories for the games too. Like I think pretty much every game he's written like the main story, and then lets other designers kind of tack on stuff if it's appropriate for like a quest or whatever, as long as it makes sense in the storyline.
So it was kind of his overall vision, but then from there, I'm sure he had other stuff as a big name in the company, he had other stuff to attend to, so he kind of had you guys take the ball and run with it. And from there, it was Scribblenauts, is that right?
Yeah, that was the next big thing. I mean, we were kind of making Drawn to Life 2, or Drawn to Life Next Chapter, and Scribblenauts at the same time. But I remember Maya pulled me in one day, and he's like, hey, I've got this idea for a new game. And I was like, oh, yeah? And he's like, yeah. It's a game where you're like a little astronaut man, and it's cool. In the game, if you type in Scribblenaut, you'll see the original concept version of the Scribblenaut, which is kind of like this little robot astronaut guy. Huh. So that's a kind of fun thing. Like you would imagine that it would make Maxwell appear or whatever, the main character, but no, it's like this weird robot thing. So I think some people were kind of confused at first, like, why is that this? It's because that's the original concept art. So.
Huh. Interesting.
Easter
I never thought before.
Yeah.
I never put that before. Astronaut, Scribblenaut.
Yeah.
So he came to you with that concept, and did it have a name at that point?
Yeah, there were some names we were tossing around, and I was like, hey, what if we... Like, he liked the idea of it doing this astronaut who's coming down and looking for little shards of stars, basically, that he had to collect to save his family or whatever. I don't remember what the story was behind it.
That's not the final story either, is it?
No, not at all. So then we were talking, and I suggested Scribblenauts, and he was like, that sounds pretty cool. And it became the project name, the working project name, and then after a while I was like, okay, I think we all like this name. And I was like, yay, I'm special. I named a game.
A game that's gone on to, and I don't think it was it owned by the WB at that point?
When we were developing it, at first it was not. It was our stuff, and then we, of course, sent it around. We're like, hey guys, check this out, and WB was like, whoa! They just loved it. They're like, this is huge. We want to be a part of it. And
was that before E3? I think it was 2009. Maybe it was.
It was before E3, because E3, WB set up that booth for us.
Ah, gotcha. Yep. Okay.
I was not there. I was there, but I wasn't presenting. I was just there running around.
That
being
can be
a
fun.
Crazy kid, yes. It
sure.
Was fun.
I remember that year. Everyone was talking about Scribblenauts. It was this kind of... it made people feel like they had discovered something that wasn't already shoved down their throat by the marketing teams, which people were getting... They're more burnt out on it now, I think, but at this point, people are really looking for stuff that isn't being forced on them, and Scribblenauts was that discovery for that year. And just the concept alone sparked people's imagination to the point where people were saying it was their game of the year before they'd even played it. I remember Ashley Davis, former Dtoid worker, writer, who actually drew the cover for one of the regular show comics. She's an accomplished artist now as well. She was in love with Scribblenauts. She was talking to me about it that year quite a bit. So yeah, congratulations on that, naming a game that now has Batman and Aquaman and stuff like that in it.
Yeah.
What did you do on? It's pretty incredible. What did you do on Scribblenauts other than the name?
That's it. No, I'm kidding. I I came in and said, "Here's your name," and walked out. No. I did roughly somewhere close to half the levels, or maybe a little less than that. Me and designer Liz England, who works at Insomniac now, she, her and I were just hammering out paper designs like constantly, just, and I actually have like a whole stack of them still. It's really cool. Maybe I shouldn't have those. I'm not sure, but whatever. If I get in trouble, I get in trouble.
You'll be all right. I don't think anyone from the WD will be. I don't think they'll watch this. I have not. So that it sounds like you did a lot of the groundwork on that, the behind the scenes stuff. What did you think of having this tool, which is so easy to break? You can just type in a thing. You can just type in rocket launcher, and then anything you're fighting just blew up with a rocket launcher. That must have been really difficult.
It was intimidating. We were all scared of it. We had as we like to say, a leprechaun that was hidden in a box that was making this game work, because we were still stunned that we even got this thing to actually work correctly. I mean, it has so many, thousands and thousands of words, and we actually had to hand create like all those things. And there's a lot of times where we'll use the same art for an object that looks pretty much the same. Which unfortunately has caused controversy because of racial terms, apparently. They're racial slurs for like an object, and I was like, really? Internets? Come on, guys. Yeah, there was an object.
I'm curious about that.
It was a type of a gourd that looks like almost identical to a watermelon, and it was called a sambo or something. And apparently that was a racial term. And so all these people made a big deal about it, and it was a big deal for like a week, like internet time, which unfortunately is like a year real time, But
sure.
But it was not a big deal. It just pushed off, and it was like whatever. But
yeah, but that sounds like that was one of the first times that you were involved in the project where people were paying so much attention to it. They saw it as something that was important, and therefore they were ready to attack it and use it as a platform to speak about what they thought was important, which in this case is the way watermelons are named, and whether that's racially sensitive or not. How did that feel to start to get in a position where you were working on something that was a big deal, something that was getting talked about regularly by a lot of different people?
It was very interesting. Drawn to Life and Lock's Quest, got talked about a lot, but seeing people go, especially to like the E3 booth, and it was like, this is our game of the show, slapping a little sticker on our kiosk. It was like, wow, we didn't realize it. We had no idea. We're like, okay, we're making this cool game, it's revolutionary, but we'll see how the public reacts. And it was leaps and bounds bigger than I think we ever could have imagined. We're like, wow, we just did it. We created something that people are going to be talking about for years. And look, now we've made Scribblenauts, Super Scribblenauts, Scribblenauts Unlimited, and now Scribblenauts Unmasked is coming out. So.
And you're not a part of any of those anymore. They don't call you up for advice or anything.
No.
They probably should.
Yeah, no.
Do you allow them advice, or do you have to be like, I'm sorry?
No, I'm sure I could talk to them still. I don't think that'd be an issue. I don't know. But here's the deal. I worked up till we were making Scribblenauts Unlimited, and that's when I was just. I think I was tired of working on Scribblenauts because I worked on it for like 3 years straight, practically, and I was like, which looking back, I'm like, man, I'm a silly person. I was making video games. What was I thinking? I want to leave this. What? And so, but I did. I was like, I'm tired. I want to make my own stuff. So I had this plan, and I was getting engaged soon to my now wife, and
Congratulations.
yep, thank you. And we decided, well, you know what? Let's just start completely fresh together. Let's move down to Arizona, which was a terrible idea.
I've heard it's hot and dry.
Yeah,
and,
I don't mind the heat. It's not so much the heat I mind. It was, I don't know. That place.
With the gene?
It was the people. That is like one of the most terrifying and racist states I've ever seen in my life. And
I've heard that about them.
I'm a mixed race person.
Beware turquoise.
Turquoise.
I don't know why that happened, but I'm glad
Superstar, why? Why did you do this? I already have nightmares.
So you're saying you're a mixed race person,
Yes.
and being in Arizona wasn't
Yeah, it
always
was.
that welcoming?
No, not at all. That's why I decided to work as a cook there, chef, because I was behind the scenes then. Didn't have to deal with people. But yeah, no, it was. The thing is, like, most people have no idea what races I am. They're like, "Whoa, you could be pretty much anything." I'm like, "Yes, I can." And
Is that shown? I'm sorry.
oh no, I'm Chinese, Hawaiian, a little bit of Japanese somewhere in there too, and white with a capital. But
But I'm assuming that has shown you firsthand that picking out races and defining yourself by that doesn't always totally work because some people exist outside of that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just how it is. Like, people being down there, everyone assumed that I was from across the border, as they put it, and I was like, no, I'm
So
actually.
you became Mexican by accident.
Yep, because they're like dark hair, a little tan, gotta be Mexican. From where we are, you gotta be, right? So, like, people just accuse me of, like, being a drug runner and all these crazy things and, like, say racial slurs at me. I'm like, that makes no sense.
And if you say like, no, I'm part Chinese, part Japanese, and then
they'd be like, oh,
yeah,
well, here's
we've
the
heard
other
that
ones.
before, Mexican. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Either
so
way,
you know
you're
what
in the
it's
wrong
like.
place. Yeah, it's crazy, right?
You know what it's like to be discriminated against for
Mhm.
being in Mexico, even though you are not.
Yep. How about that? So with that though, like, I mean, I was like, wow, like, this is still a huge issue, especially in the South. I'm like, wow, this is insane. I can't believe it. Like, I don't know. People are people.
Yeah, indeed.
That's all there is to
But
it.
that's a souring experience, to say the
Mhm.
least. So I want to backtrack a little bit. You were on up to Scribblenauts Unleashed. Is that right?
Unlimited,
Unlimited. I'm sorry.
which at that point was a 3DS. Well, it was a Wii.
Wii U?
It was a Wii game at first,
Ah,
and we were like, okay. And then 3DS technology started to unveil itself, and we're like, ooh, we can do something special with that. And then I left right before Wii U stuff actually started to get created and stuff like that. So I never saw that. I never even knew they were working on that. And then suddenly, they make the announcement, Scribblenauts Unlimited. I'm like, oh, this must be the one I was working on. And it's like on Wii U, and I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And
describe your arc on the series. You started off doing a lot of the behind the scenes design and naming it. And what did you do on the games following that?
Super Scribblenauts, more or less a lot of the same stuff. I was in charge of making sure some stuff happened. I can't remember now, honestly. That one was weird.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Okay, well, it was just level stuff still. It was just mainly level stuff and more objects and adding adjectives, which that was rough too.
I bet it was. In terms of keeping the design from breaking, I saw Super Scribblenauts as kind of like a lot of people played Scribblenauts. They love the concept still, but they felt like I wanted more from this for whatever reason. I think expectations were unfairly high because the level of excitement of the concept instilled in people was to such an extreme. So Super Scribblenauts I saw as like, we're going to fulfill your expectations this time. We've heard your feedback. We're going to do that. But that's even more pressure. I'm trying to imagine how much pressure there must have been to like live up to this concept and to have to deal with the feedback on each release.
A lot of us kind of like, we all were like, well, we know what we can do better next time. Mm-hmm. Like we already know we gotta focus these levels a little bit more on just tons of different possible solutions, especially even like the really out there ones where somebody's going to do it and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, they thought of everything, so we can finally hit that expectation where there's not like, I'm going to attach handcuffs to the Starlight and then attach the other end to a fridge and pull it through the physics. Yay, and then I won. Like that was the action levels. Everybody did that as like the solution for everything. And it showed. I mean, we're just like, oh man, we were all playing it how we expected people to play it.
Sure, of course.
Actually doing it, but people found the exploits and they used them like crazy. And then of course it ruined the experience for them. They're like, oh, this game's broken. We're like, well, why don't you just try to play it the other way?
Yeah, I've often sometimes people get irritated with me, Jeff Luke, because I tend to, between the game consumer and the game developer, I try to be pretty fair, but oftentimes I find myself like siding from the position of the game developer, even though I've never developed a game. When people get mad at game developers and call them lazy or say that they were unimaginative because they found a way to break the game, I feel like that's a little bit unfair. I've always felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is games have time, like, they have deadlines. Development has deadlines, and so because of that, you got to make sure you can fit as much as you can. So naturally, you design big and you trim. That's the nature of the beast. And unfortunately, some of the our favorite ideas as now a director, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna create some crazy ideas. Some of those ideas have to go which you can never get married to your designs because otherwise you're just gonna curl up in a ball and cry or burn your clothes and take a shower. Oh,
I'd imagine the budget constraints, the staff constraints, the time constraints. You can never truly fulfill what your imagination can create because none of those restraints exist. And Scribblenauts, for me anyway, that's what it did for people, was made them feel like they didn't have to worry about any of those constraints. Ironically speaking, it's somewhat ironic that a game that made people feel like they had no constraints had all these constraints in the development. You weren't able to make it fully what you wanted to until. Do you feel like that series has reached its potential in your opinion, or do you feel like there's still more that if you were there you might want to do with it?
Well, no. I think what the team has done now is by far the best it can be at this time. I think I'm sure there's plenty of potential still for that series because it's a dictionary, You can do crazy things with the dictionary. You can take a piece of paper out of it and make a flying plane.
It sounds like the limits are really still just on the imagination, the time and budget of the developers.
I think so.
And it doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. I kept thinking they would take a break from it, but they're stacking those releases every year and a half or so, it seems.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was like, okay, Unlimited is probably where it's going to kind of, dwindle down. This is huge now. We've got this whole object editor thing in this that the people can play with. You can share the level. The world is now kind of set up MMO-ish without the MMO. Yeah, well, it's an open world. Okay, that's better. Okay, here's the thing. Everybody was like, we barely play the levels. We play the sandbox thing on the title screen. And so we're like, well, we're going to embrace that for Unlimited. We're just going to make the whole game like a giant box now. It's going to be all these different environments you can walk to or fly to or whatever, and we'll have quests in them, though. If you talk to a guy, you can do some stuff. And then, that's how we'll structure it. It's a much more organic structure for the game, I think. And I think that is probably the only approach they can take at this point that will feel... I feel like that's the right approach for the series. So, Unlimited teased it, I guess. I think it did a really good job of showing it off. And then Unmasked now is going to add that awesome narrative, and the whole comic book thing is going to be great, I think, for it. So I'm excited to see it. I barely got to see it at E3, but I was like, wow, you guys are doing a great job, keep up the good work. And they're like, who are you? And I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to see where that series goes, and I hope they never run out of new ideas for it, because it's still ripe with potential. So then you were a chef in Arizona.
Yes.
And that must have been weird. I don't know if that was a huge financial change for you as well. I would like to think that they were paying you well. And, scribble knots.
No, I made scribble knots. Please pay me this much money. You're a chef now. Oh, no.
Because chefs can get paid pretty well.
They can.
Also.
Executive
Absolutely.
chefs can get paid fantastic, but I was a banquet / sous chef, basically, at a very nice country club that very big people lived at, like Brett Michaels, and some other cool people, and that was neat. I got to kind of get my hands dirty again, in a matter of speaking, and I love cooking. Like, it's a huge deal. But oh my gosh, I'll be there.
Yeah, we're getting comments as you're speaking. So did you meet Brett Michaels, and did you tell him I made scribble knots?
No, I never met him, but I did meet. What was her name? She was on Baywatch.
Pamela Anderson?
Not her. She was another one of the girls on there. Something Nolan.
I wouldn't know. I know
can't
David Hasselhoff. I know.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it, actually.
Somebody, I'm sure, will get it. I'll be like, Nolan, Baywatch, and they'll be like, hey, we know. And I'm like, oh, good, great. Thanks, guys. Anyways, she was very nice, very down to earth, and but her husband hated any man who was talking to her. But I can't do anything about that. I'm out there making food for them, and she's like, "Oh, thank you so much," blah blah blah, and her kids come walking up. They're like, "Oh, this is blah blah blah," and he's over there like, "I'm gonna gut you," and I'm like, "Oh no, don't do that, buddy."
He was going to gut the chef for being polite to the patron?
Yep.
My goodness. Were you much better looking than him? Was that the problem?
No, he was a very good looking man.
Huh. Good for him.
So, kudos to him.
But no excuse then for wanting to gut Jeff Luke. That's not right. No.
I felt very sad. But you know what? That was my first taste of that culture, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, celebrity combat. Interesting.
Yeah.
So were you doing anything with video games at that point? Were you really singing for video games?
No, that's a new thing, thankfully, or thanks to Wayforward, but we'll get into that in a second. I was trying to start up something down in Arizona. That was the initial plan anyways. I had some contacts down there. We had a plan, we were going to make a startup that would have helped, hopefully, maybe not have to be a chef. Fortunately, that fell through. The game industry down there is practically dead. Rainbow Studios was down there, which was owned by THQ, and obviously we all know what happened there. Which is sad, very sad. THQ I grew up with, we all grew up with that. I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
THQ. Everyone knows. The best wrestling games, hands down, came out of that place, at least on N64. And so that happened, and that fell through. So I was looking around. There's an indie scene down there, and it's kind of big, but it's not great, and the people are all really like rude. And I was like, I don't want to work with people like you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't know. It was my first taste of indie development people down there. And there were some people who were really nice. They're like, "Hey, come out with us," And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I get there, and people just like treated me like I was some like weird like drifter, and I was like, "Ugh."
But you had all this industry experience. You
Right? I
had
know. I know.
created these household names, at least in game consumer culture. These
Yeah.
are games everyone knew about. They didn't respect that. It sounds like. Do you think they were threatened by it on some
don't
level,
think.
were they successful in their own right? So they were like, or were they competitive? I'm trying to figure out because often
It's
I talk to
possible.
indie developers. Yeah, I most of the indie developers I talk to, and I don't mean to sound discriminatory, but they end up being relatively successful.
Yeah.
If I end up talking to them, and they also end up being pretty giving and wanting to form a collaborative community and help each other out for no money. But I always guessed that's in part because they're doing well enough that they feel confident they can do that. So if
Yeah.
they weren't doing well, they might be a little bit more cutthroat or a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, and that's probably a lot of it. I mean, they had their local celebrity guy down there who he's made some really good concepts, but nothing has really, I think, been huge. Maybe it's been a little bit big. I mean, I could probably, like, I don't even remember his name. I'll put it that way. Like, he's not, like, a household game person's name. So
Huh.
maybe it's possible he felt threatened, which is silly. Like, I wanted to work with this guy. I was like, you have really good ideas. Like, I told him, I was like, you have great ideas. Like, this is good stuff. So let's work on something. And he was just like, and I was like, whoa. All right.
Did he give you a reason? Did he say, well, your work on Scribblenauts, that game didn't really do very well. So,
No,
I mean, what do you even say to that?
I told him what I worked on. I was like, I've worked in the industry, blah, blah, blah. Here's some stuff I worked on. And he was like, oh, that's neat. And that was like it. And I was like, wow, all right. I think maybe it was just his attitude. Like literally everybody else except for like him and like one other guy were really rude. But unfortunately, they were like the Godfathers, I was like, well, if you are working on this with this guy, you're not part of us anymore.
Sure. So they kind of
like
set the tone for the culture there, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And
like, if you don't wear a leather jacket and slick your hair, you're not one of us.
That's the kind of stuff playing video games, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I apologize to the listeners who might be used to me saying this, but when I grew up, nobody knew anyone else that really played video games. I was the one person, I thought I was the only person in Massachusetts who bought Chrono Trigger, and I would play it by myself. I had no idea. So there wasn't this idea of some video games being cooler than others, or some people who like video games going about it in a way that was more socially acceptable or fit norm, because we were all abnormal. I mean, if you had Chrono Trigger, you were abnormal and you accepted it. You didn't talk to anybody about it. You played it by yourself, and then when you saw your friends, you played wiffle ball or something. You just didn't talk about what you did the night before. So yeah, it is strange the way amongst developers and consumers there's this new kind of pecking order as to who is the coolest, who is the Fonz of video game development.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Weird.
I don't know.
Leather jacket and hair gel.
Stay golden, pony boy.
So you were getting a bad taste in your mouth for that, I'd assume.
Yeah.
And you were sticking with the chefing, and then somehow Wayforward got involved with your life.
Yeah, so let's see. We moved, me and my wife, our fiance at the time, moved down to Arizona. She was reconnecting with family who had lived down there she hadn't seen in pretty much her whole life, which is really cool. And I did the chefing thing for a bit, and then we found out that she was pregnant. And I was like, oh! And we had a beautiful baby girl, and that was cool. But thank you. And but because of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't just be a chef my whole life. This isn't going to work. I need to get back into the game industry. So I contacted a buddy of mine, well, a few friends, Sean Velasco, and a couple of other guys from Wayforward or who worked there previously. I was like, I'm gonna apply here because I love what you guys do. Sorry, there's a dog.
Happened to me too.
Scared
No
me. I
problem.
thought it was someone screaming.
Is it your dog at least?
No, it's not. Just some dog in here.
Some close by dog. Well, I hope someone
Mhm.
attends to that. So you
Yes,
called
yes.
around Sean Velasco, now of Yacht Club Games, formerly
Yes.
of Wayforward. Adam Tierney, you mentioned before, doing some art on Locked Quest. He
Mhm.
was, I think, at Wayforward at that point.
Yeah.
So you gave them a call. That was, geez, if Sean was there, that must have been last year?
Yeah, let's see. I started April of 09? Or
Okay.
010? Oh, 010? 010, yes.
10, 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Wait, no, wait. 010? That doesn't sound right. Never mind. I'm looking
Sounds
at
too long
math.
ago.
Yeah, that was way too long. I'm sorry. That was a lie. That was a huge lie. 2012.
Oh, okay, last year.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And is there anything at Wayforward that you've done that I haven't heard about? Because what we've heard so far is that regular show is like your game. But were there other things you did for Wayforward?
Yeah, I came in and I started as level design and I showed big interest in being a director there at one point or assistant director. You're moving my way up was the plan. I was like, I need to move up. I'm done of being just game designer or level designer or whatever. So I just told him straight up in the interviews. I was like, hey, I'll come in as a level designer, but I want to be a director one day. And they're like, oh, and I was like, that's right, you heard it. and and they said, well, those are big words. And I was like, yes, they are. Director is a big word. And
Was this talking to like Matt Bozon or Voldy
yeah,
or
yeah, Matt primarily, and but they interviewed me on the phone and made me an offer, and I said yes, I would love that. And so we moved there, and the first thing I started working on when I got there was Adventure Time on 3DS, the first one there. And
the Hey I King Why'd You Steal Our Garbage?
Yep. And I was the level designer on that and doing a bunch of scripting as well and also some game design choices here and there. By the end of it, they decided that with the amount of stuff that I did on the project that it was more appropriate that I was assistant director on it. So I became assistant director on that project, and James Montani, of course, directed it. And that was great. He was awesome to work with that whole time. Like him and I totally got each other. And I was like, yes, if this is what the directors are like here, fantastic. I already knew Sean, of course, and Adam, and I didn't know Austin very well then. I got to know him a little bit, after some time. And then that project finished up, and I was working on some. Oh, and during this time, of course, Double Dragon was being made. At which point they did an open call for voice acting and singing for some songs. And I said, I am your guy. I walked up and I was like, I'm Billy and Jimmy. And they're like, oh, what? How can you be two people? I was like, easy. I will just change my voice ever so slightly. So you think maybe they are brothers, but maybe they're the same person, which they pretty much are. and then I was like, and I want to sing. And they're like, what? You can sing? I was like, maybe. How about we play some Rock Band? So that was that's how I tried out for that. We played Rock Band.
That was a lot of. We were talking about this last week with Cassie Chu. The amount of extroversion that you can find amongst some video game developers is sometimes eye-opening. That takes a lot of guts to be like, I am the one you need in your life for singing and talking. It's two different characters.
I don't know. And honestly, like my VO work was not that great. I mean, it's super silly, but it's kind of funny. I don't know. It's like, man up, Lord.
It was some of the most universally accepted stuff, as Sean and I have talked about in the past when he's been on the show. His games tend to be very polarizing. People either really meet him where he's at in terms of design and in terms of philosophy, and are like, that's exactly how I think. This is exactly what I think a game should be. Or it's really far off, and they get all uppity. But the people who love, everyone I've talked to who've played Double Dragon has really loved the voice acting and the singing. What's can you sing a little bit of that? I can't remember the theme song.
Well, okay. Double Dragon. No, Well, okay, so I sang 2 different songs on that. I sang Firebird, which was the Lab 2 theme song, or background song, and the Glad I Am, which was the Countryside 2 song. So those, I mean, the Firebird song was kind of more Van Halen-y, I guess, kind of.
That's hard to sing like that. Not so much like David Lee Roth. He just kind of talks in an excited way.
Does that crazy squeal thing that he's incredible and known for. It's impressive to me, though. But yes, he does kind of just talk. But I don't know. That squeal thing is really neat, right?
It is pretty neat. I didn't mean to debase him, but Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
Sammy Hagar, Mike Hagar, he has an incredible. I cannot sing like Hagar or Sammy Hagar, either one.
My favorite mayor.
Yeah, most people's favorite mayors in this field, anyway. So, did that feel strange to be singing on the new Double Dragon game?
Yes.
How did that feel?
You know what? Yeah. It felt like a dream come true. I was like, what? Okay, first off, we're making Double Dragon, which is already like incredible, you know. But now I get to voice the 2 main characters and sing in it. What? And that's pretty much when I decided I made it. I was like, well, at this point,
yeah,
my bucket list is completely checked off. I'm gonna go jump out of a plane now. See ya. But I've already done that, so whatever. And I live to tell people about it, which is really impressive.
You're still in the industry now, and I didn't get to talk to you. I didn't butt in to ask what it was like to work on Adventure Time either. Were you a fan of the show before you started working on the game?
I wouldn't say I was like a diehard fan, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was cute, and the characters were all so fun, and they all had such great personalities. Mm-hmm. Jake was he's my favorite character in it. He's just, I don't know, his attitude and stuff, and just the way he's always like, oh, come on, man. I just love that. It's so funny. And
absolutely.
I will never forget that episode where I think it's Marceline asks Finn, hey, what's up with that pocket on your shirt anyways? He's like, oh, this is where Jake hides. He's like, hey, Jake, and he farts. And that was the end of that episode. I was like, this is the best show in the world.
That is a great. I bought my mom that shirt.
Nice.
My mom. Yeah, my mom. Speaking of my mom.
Oh yeah, speaking of your mom. Yeah.
Regular show. Do you have an opinion? Geez, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this. What you like more, regular show or Adventure Time? I don't know if you
I
can
talk about that. I think I like regular show more because I feel like that was kind of my childhood, like saving the world every day. No, just sitting around, lounging around, not wanting to do chores and playing video games as much as I can, like that. I feel like I have a bigger connection with Mordecai and Rigby than I do with Finn and Jake, which, hey, Finn and Jake, I would love to have made connections with them, because if I could adventure through the world, fighting off evils and stuff, clearly I've done something right in my life, right?
Sure, and you've done that in your own way, fighting Nolan's husband at the country club, husband of Nolan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and fighting
Gina Lee Nolan. I remembered her name. Gina Lee Nolan. Everyone look it up
later on.
She's infamous for more than just Baywatch. I'll put it that way. So be careful. Right. Be careful how you search.
But
search. It's good.
Adventure Time is more of a there's imagination kind of bursting into that nonstop, and then when they're normal, when they have a normal conversation you might have, if that's when that's more the exception. I think that happens maybe once an episode, and beyond that, Banana Men are talking, and it's just totally bonkers. Whereas regular show, to me anyway, is kind of the inverse. They start with like these are guys you might have known. They're in situations that are not beyond real life, besides the fact that it's a bird and a raccoon. And then something really, by the end of the episode, something really interesting is happening, like they're fighting a talking cassette tape, or they're in space going backwards in time or whatnot.
Yeah.
But it seems like with the game, you're getting to jump right into that kind of imaginative reality-breaking point where stuff pretty strange is happening from the minute you start playing. That's how it seemed anyway, from what I gathered.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we worked really close with JG Quintel, the creator of the show, which was really cool. He's one of the most awesome people I've ever met. He's just like, he's so down to earth. He gets it. Like, he's like, I understand video games. He first time I meet him, he's like, let me tell you about some of my favorite games. He's like, Psycho Fox, and I'm like, Psycho Fox on Sega Master System? I was like, that is so that is super out there. I'm like, wow, well done, sir. And he's like, yeah, and Zillion, and we get this whole talk about Zillion and how cool it was, and like Wonder Boy, of course, just all these Sega Master System games. And I was like, that explains why there's a Sega Master System in the show. Like, this is near and dear to him. He's like, I didn't have an NES when I grew up. I had Sega Master System, so that was my game. That was my jam.
I had so much respect for him for putting that in there, because that's not a crowd pleaser. Like, if you do like a retro reference, you might end up drawing in people for the nostalgia factor alone, and you're probably going to go in the direction of either arcade or Nintendo. Mm-hmm. But no, he has a Sega Master System in there.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
But of course, he has a Power Glove also, but,
Those are pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
So, I'll buy that. Did he talk about Penguin Land at all?
No.
I just had to ask.
No.
Zillion, for people who don't know, that was a Sega Master System game based on anime with a blue-haired guy and spaceships. You should go check that out. Pretty neat game.
Good.
So you guys started from you both had a common vernacular already, talking about Psycho Fox, which I'm actually not familiar with.
Oh, well, you should check it out. It's very interesting. It's actually, there's some parallels with the game that we made, being that you can like switch characters on the fly and stuff, and each character has unique abilities. So that was one thing we were like, well, he would love that. You could play as like 4 different characters in Psycho Fox. And each one had different abilities. There's like a guy who could jump really high, but not really far. There was a guy who could like double jump. There's all these different unique things. One guy could like punch and stuff. It was insane. And all these things you had to keep switching, but you had to have like a special item that you could get in the level to actually be able to switch, so you're limited. But if you're smart, it's like, okay, let me hop around and, here's a spot where there's a big wall. I need to switch to like the hippo guy so I can smash through it. And then I've got a shortcut. The level design was kind of Sonic-y, where it's almost random, but not. I wouldn't say it was great level design. Sonic had some pretty cool level design, though. Like, if you knew what you were doing, you were like, you're like, I'm done. But there was tons of secrets, too. This game was a little more random. Like, I mean, if I had to say, if there was like a rank of level design games, or level designed games that were like best to worst, it was maybe in the middle somewhere, with like E.T. being the worst, probably, maybe, or like, I don't know, Treasure Master or something on NES.
I'm not familiar with Treasure Master.
That
it's nothing
game,
like what's the one with Master Higgins? I'm suddenly blanking on the name. Adventure Island.
Yeah, Adventure Island. No. Like, Adventure Island is fine. That's that's a solid game as far as I'm concerned. I don't know.
When you get the skateboard, it gets pretty fun for a little while there.
Yeah.
Then you lose the skateboard.
Until you hit a rock, yeah.
Right, then it slows down pretty quickly.
You hit a rock into a snail, and then you're dead, and you're like, why did that happen? Yeah. That game, it's a rough one. What do you think of
Bonk's Adventure? I can't help that.
Okay, I love Bonk's Adventure. I am a huge TurboGrafx person.
Me too.
Still have one, and I'm proud of that. I love Bonk. Plain and simple. I think that it's dumb, I guess, sort of, but so is Joan Mac, and that game's great too. Come on.
I think Bonk's just as smart as any other 2D platformer about a person moving from left to right for some reason, never in and out of the background. such a cool gameplay gimmick. Maybe gimmick's the wrong word because that implies that there isn't depth to it. Hook is probably better.
Yeah, the hook's good.
Mechanic's very nice. Yeah, you're a giant caveman, and you use your head for everything. You smash people with it. You climb walls with your face. You just chew up walls. Anyone who hasn't played, please. They made a GameCube port of Bonk's Adventure 1. I don't know if you ever played it.
I did, yes. It was fun. I don't know. It was Bonk.
I'm impressed. I tried to outdo you by naming a name that you hadn't known, but you already knew that name. You already played that? They made like 20 of those in Japan.
Yeah, well,
and then just stopped.
I won't tell you how I played it, but I played it. Come on.
I ended up buying it. I played it on import. Nice. But anyway, now we finally talk about the game you're working on. I think you'll be willing to tell us something. Regular show, Mordecai and Rigby in 8-Bit Land.
Yep.
What we know far is that there's already 3 different gameplay styles in it. Is that right?
Yeah. So the game starts out as a platformer, pretty standard hop and bop platformer, Mario-ish, But you can switch between 2 different characters, Mordecai and Rigby. Mordecai can double jump, Rigby can crawl through small spaces, which is really cool. So that way there's at least the use of them. You have to use both abilities. Like the first level is like just teaching you the basic. It's got there's like a little signpost, and it has like a drawing of Mordecai doing a jump, and it's like press B. We didn't want to do the classic, text box tutorial. We wanted to just do the tutorial through the level, because the old games didn't have that. Come on, let's keep with that. So
and people don't like the new. Every day I hear a new game developer telling me that they can't stand some new game that has a heavy-handed tutorial. They don't feel it's necessary. They feel it's condescending, almost mean.
Yeah.
They're trying to bore them. So you don't do that.
Yep.
So you start with Mordecai and Rigby from the start. You have the option to.
You can switch at any point. Yep. And the first world is kind of it's really focused on the platforming stuff. So you're going through it's all focused in the park, and then you get to the next world, and it's much more about space. So at this point, finally, now you can switch to shmup mode, which is like a Gradius game. It's not auto-scrolling; it's just free roaming, so more like Defender, I guess. And you're flying around through levels, and it's brutal. But we want it to be that way. We're like, it's your own fault. If that bullet hits you, you did something wrong, basically.
Sure, so it's fair, but it's challenging. And you can still switch between, I don't know, what's flying around at that point? Mordecai and Rigby ships?
Yeah, well, so it's Mordecai spaceship, and it's really cool looking. It's a very, classic style. I mean, it's like, wow, this is what I would imagine would be in the show, or from straight out the 80s or early 90s, whatever. And you can switch though back to platforming mode at any point while you're in these modes, and it's designated by a space background, like the classic space background that you see on the title card of the episodes. It's like regular show, and it's that crazy wavy space.
Oh, cool.
So anytime you jump into that area, you can switch by hitting the trigger buttons, and but there's times where it's like, well, I'm in space, but there's a wall, and I will bump into that wall as a ship, but I won't bump into that wall as platformer. So you have to time your thing and switch and jump and switch into space again to get to secret areas. So it's really testing people's ability to start using all these modes together. So then in the third world, you've got top-down mode, which is like Smash TV, kind of. Or as we've been saying, Fester's Quest. Yeah, that's a loud dog. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Not your fault. It's interesting that it's getting some worked up.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really fun as well. I mean, it's very much like running around, run and gun, dodge enemies that are coming at you all the time, and as well, switching back to platformer mode to still take advantage of that mode too. Which is crazy, right? I know, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it was a lot of work to try to make this stuff work. I was like, my mind hurts right now making this right now. But and then the fourth world puts it all together. So you've got like blocks of space floating in the middle of nowhere, and then like you switch to space and jump out of space to jump up into top-down mode, and it's insane, but super awesome.
I'm trying to even so the Fester's Quest to me was very Blaster Master.
Yes. Well, it's
And
built
being
off the
able
same
to-
engine.
Yes, indeed.
So-
And the ability to be able to switch from being a ship to suddenly being a guy in order to pass through a wall. I'm still trying to. How does the guy pass through the wall?
Well, okay, so I guess you could say it's similar to Switch Force in a way, where we have like a background layer that comes forward based on what mode you're in. So in top-down and shmup mode, that wall is a barrier for them. But imagine it's like they're all pushed back, and you're in top-down mode and space mode. You're farther back in the background.
Uh-huh.
But as platformer mode, you're in front of them, so you can go in front of this wall. And
Almost like Super Paper Mario. I don't know if you
yeah, kind of. Yep, exactly.
Huh,
So
interesting.
depending on your
So it's all
perspective.
one world. It doesn't. You're in the same world regardless of whether you're in shoot 'em up mode,
Mhm.
2D platforming mode, or top down. Really,
Yeah. Yep.
that is a lot to pack in and
Yeah.
to make. It doesn't surprise me that this is coming from someone who worked on Scribblenauts, where it was like, how are we going to put all these concepts together and make it make any sort of sense? Oh, we'll just figure it out.
Yeah, well,
That
let's
you're-
figure it out, but make huge promises and see if it works out. Yeah, that's what I'm known for.
And how is it working out so far? How far into development of the game are you?
We are pretty much there. We're looking really good. It's fun. Like people have played it in the office, and they're all like, "Man, we totally love this game. It's really fun." I'm like, "Yes, I've done something right." So that's cool. And but yeah, I know it was challenging to make for sure. And there's 4 worlds. Each world kind of introduces a new mechanic, more or less, except for the last world just pushes it all together. Like, here we go. Now that you've learned these other 3 modes, try doing them all together. Ha 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 ha. And then you're like, oh, it hurts. It's so hard. But it's not. I don't know. I'd like once you kind of figure it out, you're like, oh, I get it. So,
Yeah, it doesn't hurt when something is hard as long as you don't feel like life is unfair and there's no way to ever win. When you feel like you're being respected and challenged, that's exciting. That makes me want to see how I can better myself and improve my skills. So that sounds pretty fun. How do you think fans of the show will take it? Because regular show fans, from what I've gathered, are a pretty diverse group. It's not quite as, hate to say it, but a lot of people like Adventure Time because they think a lot of other people like Adventure Time. So it's kind of in right now to like Adventure Time, wear the hats and all that. Regular show it's not unfashionable. I'm not saying that, but it's not something people lob onto just for how it affects their image. And there's some people that just love the one-liners. There's some people that actually really love the characters and how they're evolving. Mordecai is slowly inching up the courage to really go steady with Margaret, that sort of thing. And other people just love the setting and the world and then be there. So how are all those different fan types going to take to this game you're making?
I feel like they're going to be pretty positive about it. I think, people are going to have their expectations, and we're not going to meet them all, but that's what maybe another one's for when down the road somebody else can make one and be like, oh, well, we saw what happened with the last one. It bombed horribly. No. No, okay, so one, obviously the big help was that JG wrote the script for the game. So it's going to kind of play out feeling like an episode, more or less. It starts out with them just having to do chores, but they decide to blow it off. Why? Because they find a weird video game console in a package on their doorstep, and they hook it up and get sucked into this game world. And it's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Yeah. So it's already setting up the premise of like what an episode would probably be, anyways.
Right. But they usually wouldn't get to the point where they get sucked into the world till halfway the episode. But you start right off with that, which is great for me. As much as I love regular show, I usually am waiting for the twist.
Yeah.
And you jump right in with the twist.
Yeah. But there's more twists that will blow people's minds. So, yeah. You'll see. Don't worry. You're gonna
Are
see it.
other is Pops in it at all? I'm a big Pops fan.
Unfortunately, no. The
I
people
can't see
who,
how he would fit.
yeah, the people who are in it is Mordecai, Rigby, and Benson at the beginning. But
Okay.
then throughout the game, it's just Mordecai and Rigby. But there's a lot of like enemies in the game. All the enemies in the game are like enemies in the show. So you have like the blondes and like the VHS soldiers and like flying orbs and stuff like that. The geese. So you're gonna see familiar faces.
Very good. I'm
Yeah.
excited,
Yeah.
particularly about VHS soldiers. Another decision he made. Like, I don't know if people even know what VHS is anymore. If I
I
ask a
don't.
12-year-old VHS, they're like, "What?" They
Yeah, is that like
barely
an
know what
acronym?
DVDs are.
Yeah, is that like
exactly.
very hot like samba? I don't want to do that. That sounds really hot. Yeah, you're right.
For people who don't know, there's an episode of regular show where it's about the old Betamax versus VHS wars, and there's, I think, stop me if I'm wrong on this, they have a Betamax and they want to be able to play it, but they can't get a player. They find out that the VHS was this huge government conspiracy. It's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And completely losing anyone under 20 years old in terms of reference, but he just didn't care.
No,
Just went for
and
it.
that's what I love about that. Like, there's so many references that no one, besides like people 20 and up or so, would actually get. So, but that's cool because it actually creates, the audience that it has. People from like 40 down to 5, So it's really neat. I mean, yeah, I don't know. This game is full of that type of stuff. Little references here and there of like good old classic stuff. You'll see soon enough.
But it makes me wonder, how did you? And I felt this way when I was talking with James about the Adventure Time game, which you worked on.
Mhm.
I'd imagine it would be really hard to think, well, first of all, this is somebody else's property. This is a publisher giving us the money, so we've got to make sure that this hits their target demographic. But their target demographic is literally a moving target. You've got 60-year-olds and you've got 40-year-olds, and you've got to think. And it's only on 3DS as of right now. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you've got that narrowing it down. Like, well, it's the 3DS audience. Who are they? What are they going to want to buy? How did you go about approaching that problem of figuring out who to make a game for?
Well, I said, what kind of game would I want to play when I was a young kid?
Mm.
And while it, in many ways, doesn't really apply to today, I think maybe that's an okay thing because it's going to give a kid an opportunity to see something that was, once upon a time, completely appropriate to play at that age, And, but at the same time, it's something that someone our age could pick up and just be like, yes, this is some good old-fashioned gaming right here. So it's going to be brutal, and I'm sure kids are going to be like so frustrated at first, but I think they're going to want to push through because, one, they're going to get, well, this game is hard because I jumped wrong, Oh, I didn't aim that jump correctly. I didn't jump on this guy's head. I didn't shoot that guy in time. I think they're going to figure it out, and that's a great thing. And you know what? They're going to be able to go back and play Mega Man and be like, I get this now. So maybe I'm going to help introduce some kids to some retro games once upon a time.
Pretty awesome. So it could be sort of a gateway to the Master System for Psycho.
It's a gateway drug.
That sounds like a great attitude to go towards. You didn't have to give in too much to just thinking, what do people want? You could imagine what you would have wanted and hoping that those things are somewhat universal. And my guess is that they are. There's a certain age where you can be challenged, and it's oftentimes the same age where you're still willing to, you can still learn languages really easily. And I feel like video games are just another language, and a challenging game is just a challenging language that you need to learn. I've seen 6-year-olds play Rhythm Heaven, and I've talked about this on the show before, and just lose and just lose and just lose. And they're like, again, every time. They don't care at all. Whereas, I give it to a 40-year-old, and they're like, forget it. I've got better things to do with my time. But a 6-year-old is like, I will master this and enjoy the process. So that makes me very hopeful for your game.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. If it's one of those things where people accept it, and like especially kids, then I think we're on the right track. We can start becoming a little more or a little less forgiving, I guess, in a matter of speaking. Not having like, oh, well, if you jump in this pit, you're not actually going to die. You're just going to respawn next to it,
Mm-hmm.
I want to die.
I think that's what happens in Hey Ice King, Why'd You Steal Our Garbage? You fall in a pit.
Oh, you warp back to the beginning.
That's true.
No, you do, in fact, go back to Edge.
I'm trying to recall.
Yes.
I enjoyed that game quite a bit, but I played it too recently. And speaking of that, did that game, from what you know anyway, and from what you can talk about, did that game do well enough that this is why we're getting another Adventure Time game from Wayforward, and also now a regular show game from Wayforward? I'm assuming it must have worked out the first time.
Well, I think D3, the publisher, or D3 publisher, they were really, I think, happy with the whole process as a whole. They get that we're passionate about what we do. I think that's one big thing. We are a very, very passionate group of individuals who, we love our games. We all grew up on them, and I think it probably shows in a lot of the stuff that we make. And I think, they have respect for that, and I believe, yes, Adventure Time did really well. I don't know if that's exactly the reason why we're doing more. I think they just probably... I like to think in my mind that they were like, these guys are stand-up. Let's work with them again.
I hope so. And you have Tom Hewlett is working on the new Adventure Time game, which I'm really blanking on the name of. Something about a dungeon, and I don't know. Is that right?
Yes. Adventure Time, explore the dungeon because I don't know. Because I don't know! Why are you going to explore that? I don't know. Come on. You'll find out, though. You'll find out.
What a great time to be at Wayforward. Wayforward having a long history, but from what I can gather, just really continuing to come up in terms of the level of profile of the games they're working on, and the amount of games that are going on at one time, and the amount of talent Wayforward is absorbing. It's a wonderful time for you to be there.
Yeah,
How has it been at Wayforward compared to your prior work in the industry?
It's the best job I've ever worked at anywhere, any industry. So if that's no, it's really easy. I mean, they are giving us the ability to make like the whole reason why we got into the game industry, right? We grew up playing games like Double Dragon, and now we're making them, for a new generation, where we get to show them, we get to show a new audience, that we get the license, but that we are willing to take it on a new approach. Sean's work on Double Dragon was fantastic. It's really a great game, and I love it. I'm not biased, though.
I love it, too, and I'm excited to see him take a lot of the stuff that he acquired at Wayforward, a lot of the people he met at Wayforward, a lot of the lessons he learned, and he's spreading kind of the Wayforward attitude out with his own thing. It's very nice to see that. And in general, and I've said this before, but maybe you didn't listen to that episode, listener or watcher. I hope you didn't. When I reached a certain age, I was really worried that the kind of games I grew up on were truly going to die out. I've seen the arcades die out. I knew that things can die in the video game industry. Whoa!
Whoa! Who's that? That's my daughter. Say hi, Anna. Can you say hi? Good job.
Ah! That was refreshing.
And the internet just cried or something.
I was babbling before that I'd seen aspects of video games die.
Yeah.
And I was worried about that. Wayforward seems like it's people who loved the same things about video games I did growing up, and is continually bringing it back to that. And that's something I'm very grateful for. And happy to see you guys succeeding as you have, because you're proving that you can teach pixel art in game design school. You don't have to just do 3D modeling, and there's a practical application for that.
Yeah, and honestly, like, pixel art is its own beast. Like I think if you learn pixel art to begin with, you're gonna have a far better understanding of just game art in general, like where you can take shortcuts and it's still gonna look good, all that stuff. And because I mean, look at pixel art. You zoom in, it's like a huge mess. You're like, what is this? There's weird colors that make no sense. And then you zoom out, and you're like, that's an eyeball. Oh my gosh! And it looks like an eye when it's far out. Final Fantasy like 6 characters specifically, like those are tons of that. Like it's crazy. And Chrono Trigger and stuff. Square was really good at what they did. Like they got it. It's almost like they were scaling down like a drawn image, and they're like, oh, look at that mess, but it still looks like an eye. Let's try to replicate that with pixels.
It is a very unique that
Mhm.
it's all about exactly how close you are from it, and then
Yeah.
how big it is in relation to everything else on the screen, which I'd imagine would subtly teach a designer like how to think about the big picture and how to not worry about maybe a little aspect not seeming right when you get too close to it and think, well, how is this going to look in context, which is largely what game design is all about. If you have just one really awesome jump in your game, but the rest of it stinks, then people are going to hate that game. It's all about making it all fit together,
Exactly.
I'd imagine. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That speaks to mind. I didn't talk enough about the kinds of games that were an influence on you. You talked about Blaster Master and Mega Man 2, but are there other games that you, from a design perspective, really taught you something? And if so, what did you take from those games in terms of what you wanted to learn about design?
Super Metroid. Super Metroid. I think that game is the most perfectly designed game. That game taught me like everything about good flow. Like they're constantly teaching you stuff, and you don't even realize it because they're blocking you on spots that you're like, oh, I'm blocked, but you don't even think about it as like a gating mechanism. It's like, oh yeah, naturally I'm blocked because there was something that must have happened here. Like you're creating the story on the fly as you're playing this game. That's insane. That's like, no, I don't think anyone's been able to like really do that since. I feel there's something about that game. Like even Metroid Fusion, it had a narrative. You would go to that little thing, and then computer Adam is talking to you, and it created the whole thing. It's like, oh, now you need to go here. We didn't have that in Super Metroid. We're like, well, I'm gonna explore this world because it's really interesting. And I don't know, like every day I'm trying to make a new game. If I'm trying to work on something that needs like good flow, like that's always my go-to. I'm like, okay, let's look at this. That's crazy. So that's a big one. I don't know. There's plenty of other games. There's too many.
And we're out of time, I found out. I totally
man.
blanked on. I haven't been able to see my clock, so
Oh,
I've been failing hard. But thankfully,
Okay.
we have Finistar texting us and telling us
oh
that
yes.
we are annoying him by talking much. I'll get that at the end. But a very nice note to end on, Super Metroid. And
Yeah.
making it seem like an organic process to be in the game and not having it telegraphed to you that you're hitting a design decision, that you're just in that world. And we can look forward to some of that in your game that's coming out, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
It's called Regular Show Mordecai and Rigby in 8-Bit Land.
That's correct. It's coming out this fall. A couple things real quick. Kevin Cassidy says hello to you.
Oh, hi, Kevin. He's from
And-
Go Nintendo. Wonderful.
Yes. And then if you want, I can sing a tiny bit of Double Dragon as a
Yes, please.
goodbye.
That is a perfect.
Okay.
They can follow you on Twitter, though. You're Chef Luke.
Yes, you can follow me at Chef Luke, ChefFLuk. It's Jeff Luke as a cook. There you go. All right, and we'll put this one out with some Glad I Am. You ready? Bye-bye, Internet. Awfully familiar. They try to kill ya every time. It's a crime. You're getting stronger while ever longer you resist with your two fists. It's okay, I'm here to stay, and I'm glad I am, glad I am, glad I am. Always alert, down in the dirt, bringing the hurt, and I'm glad I am, glad I am. Goodbye, Internet! it.